Hi crafters, this is Yana Smakula. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I have several personalized birthday and anniversary card ideas to share, featuring some cool techniques with stencils, inks, and hot foil stamping. I'm working with the Celestial Zodiac collection from Spellbinders to make these cards. One of the cool products from this release is the Layered Moon Stencil. It's a 4-pack or 4-layer stencil to create a layered ink blended moon. I've labeled my stencils with some tape and numbers to help me identify the layers, and I suggest you do the same. This will make the process 1,000 times easier. So the first layer is just a circle, and you have the positive and also the negative piece. The negative piece can be used to mask the ink blended moon while working on the background. Now you can also cut your moon out using a circle die. The circle die is not included with the stencil, but we all have loads of circle dies in our stash, so I'm sure you'll be able to find one circle die that fits this moon size. There's also the second, the third, and the fourth layers to this moon. Each stencil has these two openings in the opposite corners, and this is so you can align the stencil layers. You take a pencil and you add a pencil mark onto your paper through the opening. These pencil marks will tell you how to align your second, your third, and your fourth layers on top. It's very handy. I have taped my stencil onto the paper. This is Nina Solar Weight 80-pound cardstock, and I also use the Spellbinders Best Ever Craft Tape to tape it down. You can use any low-tech tape, washi tape, or whatever you have in your stash. You just want to tape your stencil down onto the paper so that it's not going to move. I'm going to ink blend the moon using several colors of gray ink. I'm starting with Barely Beige from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm using my mini round ink blending tool and the Spellbinders blending foam. This is how I prefer to ink blend. Of course, there are so many different ink blending tools, ink blending brushes out there. I encourage you to use whatever you are most comfortable to blend with. I'm adding a heavier layer of ink around the edges of the moon and then keeping the center portion of the moon nearly free from any ink blending. This helps to create the appearance of that spherical shape. Removing my first stencil, and I'm going to add the second layer stencil on top. I'm using the dots to help line it up, and once I have aligned it, I'm taping the stencil in place using tape. Here's a close-up. You can see how the pencil marks on the paper have aligned with the circular openings on the second layer stencil. This doesn't look handy at the moment because the second layer is quite easy to align, but when you get to the third and the fourth layers, these pencil marks will prove to be extremely useful to help you align the layers. I'm using a slightly darker color of ink. This is Fog, also from Simon Says Stamp. Again, I'm adding more color around the edges, and I'm ink blending the second layer. I'm going to remove that second layer stencil, and you can begin to see the moon taking shape. Time to add the third layer stencil, and again, you use the dots to align the stencil on the paper. If it doesn't look right to you, that means you need to flip the stencil. Here, I was using the wrong side and I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't align. So I flipped it to the back, and you can see that now it aligns perfectly with the previous layers. Again, I taped it in place with tape. And now I'm using a slightly darker gray ink color. This is Stone from Simon Says Stamp, and ink blending the next layer. I'm going in rather heavy-handed, especially in the tinier, smaller openings. And let's take a look. Our moon is really starting to take shape. We just have the fourth layer to ink blend. In this one, again, you align using the pencil marks on your paper. There is this shape in the top left corner that looks like a flower, and I make sure that the center of that flower aligns when I'm placing the fourth layer. So this is another guide mark, an impromptu guide mark, I would say, that I use when aligning this particular layer. Here is a close-up. You can see how that aligned on the paper. Now, the last color I'm using for this moon is Smoke, the darkest gray. In this layer, we'll add craters to the moon. Here is a look at the finished ink blended piece. I think it turned out rather nice. You can ink blend these moons using a variety of ink colors. You can go light, you can go dark, you can use gray, yellow, or you can even use different colors: purple, blue, pink, green, whatever your heart wants. Spellbinders actually has all sorts of ink blended moon examples on their website, including some ink color suggestions. And I think they use the distress inks to blend their moons. So you can download that PDF from the website and use it as inspiration or as additional examples. Here is one more moon, which I ink blended with darker grays. I used soft granite, charcoal, and black dye inks from Hero Arts, and then a white pigment ink for the top layer for the craters. Here are these two moons side by side. You can also ink blend on colored cardstock. Here I started with a light gray card base, and I skipped using the first layer. So that is also an option for you. Here are these two moons side by side, one ink blended on white cardstock and the other one ink blended on the light gray. I also ink blended a yellow and gray moon using the Simon Says Stamp Duckling, Simon Says Stamp Sunshine, Hero Arts, soft granite, and charcoal ink. So another completely different look. Now you might have noticed that this last paper that I ink blended on took the ink a lot better, and the ink ended up looking a lot more vibrant. That is because I used a different kind of paper. Not the Nina Solar White that I usually use. I used glossy photo paper. I have been experimenting with the glossy photo paper for some time, and I love how the glossy photo paper takes the ink when doing ink blending, and I also love how well it foils. There's nothing quite like it out there. I wanted to create some galaxy backgrounds for these moons and also for some zodiac foiling, so I went ahead and I ink blended several galaxy backgrounds using my dye inks. Galaxy ink blending is nothing new. It has been around for several years, and I have shared a video or two on my YouTube channel in the past showing this type of look. I typically use the same colors of ink when creating these galaxies. I use yellow, blue, purple, and black, and I just switch between different manufacturers because it doesn't quite matter. I just pick the colors that I like. Here, I started with the Simon Says Stamp Duckling ink. It's actually a very pale yellow, but because I ink blended it on glossy photo paper, and this particular paper is designed to take as much ink as possible, the ink color appears much more vibrant. This ink color would look a lot different, very pale yellow on regular cardstock, but here it looks a lot more vibrant. Next, I ink blended sea glass. Again, very pale blue, but because of the type of the paper that I'm blending on, it appears a lot more vibrant. Then I ink blended soft navy, a very dark blue, and this is my favorite part. I adore very dark blue colors, and I love how this particular blue looks on this glossy paper. Mixing blue and yellow gave me areas of green, and it added a lot of much needed darkness to help my galaxy background begin to take shape. I also ink blended purple using the deep purple color from Simon Says Stamp, and that helped to tie all of the sections and all of the colors together on the edges of the panel. I did keep the center of the galaxy lightest, and then I went back to the sea glass color to add more of that and blended that in with the other colors, and I also went back to the yellow to blend the colors some more. My ink blending foam frayed a little bit from all of that hard work that I was doing. That's actually one of the negative sides of using the Spellbinders blending foams. So I had to pause and give it a haircut before I could go back to blending. But this is my favorite type of ink blending foam. It's like a makeup sponge, and it really blends so perfectly, not like the other foams that I've tried. I went back to the colors I used and I reapplied those to build my galaxy background. I love this look, and I love the glossy paper for this because of the vibrancy of the colors that I can achieve. You really cannot get these vibrant colors on regular porous paper. If you've never tried ink blending on photo paper, on glossy photo paper, because there's also matte photo paper, I highly encourage you to give it a try. Just try it once and you'll see what I'm talking about. I ink blended several backgrounds using this technique, and next I used the glimmer plates from the Celestial Zodiac collection from Spellbinders, and I foiled several backgrounds. For the first one, I foiled the Celestial Star background half plate, and I foiled it twice using aura foil. The size of the plate is large enough only to cover half of the background, so you need to foil it twice to cover the entire background for an A2 card, which measures 4¼ by 5½ inches. I'm not showing the foiling process in this video, as this video is not exactly about hot foiling, but if you are new to the hot foil stamping and to the hot foil concept in general, I do have many other videos on my YouTube channel explaining this process in detail. I also foiled several constellations across the ink-blended moons. The constellations are sized perfectly to fit inside the moon, so you can use the moon as a placeholder for the constellations. Here's a look at this. I love the foiling added over the ink-blended moon. Now, I also foiled the sub-sentiment on the bottom of this panel. That was so that I could cut it out and pop it up on my card. I then used a circle die to cut the moon out, and then a rectangle die to cut the sentiment out. I made this card and this background into a mini slimline. The card measures 6¼ by 3¼ inches, and the background panel was cut 1/4 inch smaller. I then foam mounted the panel onto the card, and the moon panel was also foam mounted and offset, and I trimmed a part of the moon off, and I quite like this off-centered design. I didn't add any other embellishments to this card because I feel like the background and the foiling and the ink blending is quite sufficient to create a perfect design for this card, so nothing else was added, no other embellishments. For my next background, I made one from constellations. Here's how I did it. I placed a piece of scrap paper onto my glimmer platform. I positioned a sentiment plate in the center, and next I surrounded the sentiment with the constellation plates, building the background. The scrap piece of paper worked as a guide. It gave me approximate measurements for the card front. It told me where to place my glimmer plates. Now, the scrap piece was a little bit longer, a little bit bigger, but overall it gave me a pretty good idea of the card front size I needed to foil on. I then covered it all with a piece of foil, added my glossy ink-blended background on top, and foiled this background. And let's take a look. It turned out really well. You can see the beautiful foiling happening over that vibrant ink-blended galaxy. I finished this card by covering up that sentiment with a moon sentiment. I didn't quite like how the sentiment foiled on the background. It was a little bit crooked, so I placed a moon one over it. I made this once again into a mini slimline card, as I'm quite fond of this card size at the moment. And like I said, the card measures 6¼ by 3¼ and the panel was cut 1/4 inch smaller, and it was foam mounted onto the card. For the next card, I foiled 2 constellations directly onto the background. I also added sentiments right below them, but that has proven to be quite difficult to perfectly align. So I later refoiled the same sentiments on white cardstock and popped them up on the card. This type of design makes up for a nice anniversary or love you card where you have the 2 signs. My sign is Pisces and my hubby's sign is Cancer. So this is a card for us and it's personalized. I wanted to add several stars to this background, but I didn't want to add any more foiling. So I created the stars in the background using a white pen. I just added larger size dots scattered all across the background. And I used various size white pens from my stash. I have some from Sakura and also a few pens from Jane Davenport. So here's a look at the cards I have for you today, created featuring the Galaxy ink blending on glossy paper and the hot foil stamping techniques. I hope you found this video useful. If you make a card or a few cards inspired by this video, I would love it if you shared your project online and tagged me on social media. I always love seeing what you guys are making. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet done so. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.